The tribal chief has returned, and he brought the thunder with him. On May 1st, 2026, in one of the most shocking and explosive segments in Monday Night Raw history, Roman Reigns made his unexpected comeback to WWE television and immediately made his presence felt in the most violent way imaginable. When CM Punk found himself outnumbered and beaten down by the Vision, a dominant faction that had been terrorizing the Raw roster for months, it looked like the World Heavyweight Champion was about to suffer career-ending injuries. Then the lights went out. Then the music hit. Then Roman Reigns emerged and single-handedly dismantled an entire faction to save his former rival. The moment was shocking, intense, and absolutely unforgettable. To understand the full magnitude of this moment, we need to rewind and understand the landscape of Monday Night Raw in the weeks leading up to May 1st. The Vision had emerged as the most dominant and dangerous faction on Raw since their formation in early March. Led by the calculating and vicious Seth Rollins, the group also consisted of Finn Balor, Damian Priest, and Dominic Mysterio. Together, they had declared war on everyone they deemed unworthy of sharing their ring, their show, their spotlight. The Vision's mission statement was simple but terrifying. They would destroy anyone who stood in their way and remake Raw in their image. Their list of victims over the past 2 months was extensive and brutal. They had put Chad Gable on the shelf with a legitimate knee injury after a vicious post-match assault. They had ended Shinsuke Nakamura's recent momentum with a 3-on-1 beatdown that required medical attention. They had attacked legends, humiliated rising stars, and created an atmosphere of fear and chaos on Monday Night Raw. The backstage segments showed other wrestlers looking over their shoulders constantly, afraid they would be next. General Manager Adam Pearce seemed powerless to stop them, his authority undermined at every turn. The Vision had set their sights on CM Punk specifically 3 weeks prior to this moment. The World Heavyweight Champion had been cutting promos about how he didn't fear anyone, how he had faced and beaten every challenge put in front of him, and how no faction or group would intimidate him into silence. Seth Rollins took that as a personal challenge. The Visionary, as he called himself, cut a scathing promo about how Punk was a relic from another era, how his championship reign was living on borrowed time, and how the Vision would make an example of him. The first physical confrontation came 2 weeks ago when Punk was defending his championship against Finn Balor in a match that had been sanctioned by management. Punk was in control of the match, building toward what looked like a successful title defense when the rest of the Vision hit the ring. Seth Rollins, Damian Priest, and Dominic Mysterio stormed the ring and attacked Punk, causing an immediate disqualification. But the disqualification didn't stop the assault. They beat Punk down mercilessly 4-on-1, with Rollins delivering a curb stomp on the exposed championship belt. The image of Punk's face pressed against his own title while being stomped was sickening and powerful. Punk tried to get his revenge the following week, calling out the Vision and demanding they face him like men rather than attacking in groups. Seth Rollins came out alone, seemingly accepting Punk's challenge to a 1-on-1 confrontation. They started brawling in the ring, and for a moment it looked like Punk was getting the better of the exchange. Then the trap was sprung. The other members of the Vision attacked from behind, and once again Punk was beaten down 4-on-1. This time the assault was even more vicious, with Priest powerbombing Punk through the announce table and Balor hitting a coup de grace from the top turnbuckle onto Punk's ribs. Medical personnel rushed to check on Punk after that second assault, and legitimate concern filled the arena. The champion was helped to the back, and later reports suggested he had suffered bruised ribs and would need to be evaluated throughout the week. Adam Pearce issued a statement condemning the Vision's actions and promising that there would be consequences, but nobody believed him. The Vision had run roughshod over authority figures before, and there was no reason to think this time would be different. That brings us to May 1st, 2026, and the segment that would change everything. The show was about 90 minutes in, following several matches and storyline advancement segments. CM Punk's music hit unexpectedly, and the crowd erupted as the World Heavyweight Champion walked out onto the stage. Punk was visibly favoring his ribs, moving more slowly than usual, but the determination on his face was unmistakable. He had the championship draped over his shoulder and a microphone in his hand, and everyone knew he had something to say. Punk walked down the ramp and climbed into the ring, taking his time because of the rib injury, but showing no fear whatsoever. When he raised the microphone to speak, the crowd quieted down to hear what their champion had to say. Punk talked about how the Vision had been targeting him for weeks, how they had attacked him repeatedly because they were afraid to face him one-on-one. He talked about how Seth Rollins hid behind his group because he knew he couldn't beat CM Punk in a fair fight. The promo was classic Punk, mixing humor with intensity, calling out his enemies while standing tall despite being injured and outnumbered. Punk issued an open challenge to any member of the Vision to face him right here, right now. He didn't care if it was Rollins, Baylor, Priest, or even Dominic. Someone was going to come down to that ring and face the World Heavyweight Champion, and Punk was going to prove that no faction, no matter how dominant, could break his spirit or take his championship. The crowd was firmly behind Punk, chanting his name and supporting his defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence was deafening, and Punk stood in the center of the ring waiting for someone to answer his challenge. Then Seth Rollins' music hit, and the leader of the Vision walked out onto the stage with a microphone of his own. But Rollins wasn't alone. Behind him came Finn Balor, Damian Priest, and Dominic Mysterio. All four members of the Vision stood at the top of the ramp, and the smiles on their faces made it clear they had been expecting this, had been planning for this moment. Rollins spoke first, congratulating Punk on his bravery, but calling him an idiot for walking into an obvious trap. He explained that the Vision had been waiting for Punk to make exactly this kind of desperate challenge, and now they were going to finish what they started. Rollins talked about how after tonight, CM Punk would no longer be the World Heavyweight Champion because he would be in a hospital bed, and his injuries would force him to vacate the title. The threat was clear and chilling, and you could see Punk in the ring calculating his odds of surviving what was about to happen. The Vision started walking down the ramp as a unit, spreading out as they approached the ring to cut off any escape routes. Punk backed into the center of the ring, clutching his ribs with one hand but raising his fists with the other, prepared to go down fighting if that's what it took. The crowd was chanting for Punk, desperately hoping someone would come to help him, but no one appeared. The Vision surrounded the ring, climbing onto the apron from all four sides simultaneously. Punk spun around, trying to keep all four men in his line of sight, but it was impossible. He was surrounded, outnumbered, and injured. This was going to be a slaughter. Seth Rollins gave the signal, and all four men entered the ring at once. They rushed Punk from all angles, and despite the champion's best efforts to fight back, the numbers game was too much. Punk managed to land a few strikes, catching Dominic with a kick and stunning Baylor with a forearm, but Priest grabbed him from behind and the assault began in earnest. They took turns beating Punk down, methodically destroying the injured champion. Priest delivered a massive chokeslam. Baylor hit a sling blade. Dominic stomped away at Punk's injured ribs. And Seth Rollins orchestrated it all, directing traffic like a conductor, leading a symphony of violence. The crowd was booing heavily, some fans even throwing trash toward the ring in disgust at what they were witnessing. Punk tried to fight back several times, showing incredible heart, but every time he got to his feet, he was immediately cut down again. The Vision was making a statement, and that statement was brutal and definitive. They pulled Punk to his feet, and Rollins positioned him for another curb stomp, this time onto the steel chair that Dominic had introduced into the ring. This wasn't just an attack anymore. This was attempted career-ending violence. Rollins backed up, measured Punk carefully, and prepared to deliver the curb stomp that might end the champion's career. The crowd was screaming, some in horror, some in anger, everyone desperate for someone, anyone, to come save CM Punk. Rollins charged forward, going for the stomp. Then, at that exact moment, the arena went completely dark. The sudden darkness created instant confusion. The Vision stopped their assault momentarily, looking around trying to figure out what was happening. The crowd's noise level increased exponentially, a mixture of confusion and anticipation. Then it happened. Breaking through the darkness like an explosion came the unmistakable opening notes of Roman Reigns' entrance music. The building absolutely erupted. The noise was deafening, louder than anything heard all night, louder than anything heard in months. People were on their feet screaming, some in shock, some in pure excitement. Roman Reigns had been absent from WWE television since his confrontation with Braun Breaker and Paul Heyman back in July of 2025. Nearly 10 months without an appearance. And now, at the moment when it mattered most, the tribal chief had returned. The lights came back up, and there he was standing at the top of the ramp. Roman Reigns looked like he had been carved from stone. He was wearing all black, his hair tied back, and the look on his face was absolutely murderous. This wasn't Roman Reigns coming back for a feel-good moment or a nostalgia pop. This was Roman Reigns coming back with bad intentions. In the ring, the vision had momentarily frozen, all 4 members staring up at the ramp in disbelief. Seth Rollins' expression was particularly notable, a mixture of shock and something that might have been fear. Reigns didn't waste any time with theatrics or playing to the crowd. He walked down that ramp with purpose and intensity, and with each step, you could feel the energy in the building reaching critical mass. The Vision tried to regroup, positioning themselves to deal with this new threat. Seth Rollins was barking orders at his faction members, trying to formulate a plan on the fly. But you could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They had been dominating through numbers, but Roman Reigns was a different kind of problem. Reigns reached the ring and paused, looking up at the 4 members of the Vision staring down at him. Then, with the confidence that only comes from being one of the most dominant superstars in WWE history, Roman Reigns climbed the steel steps and entered the ring. The moment he stepped through those ropes, the Vision attacked. All 4 of them rushed Reigns at once, trying to overwhelm him with numbers before he could get his bearings. It was a smart strategy, but it wasn't enough. Roman Reigns exploded with a fury that was breathtaking to witness. He caught Dominic Mysterio first, lifting him up and throwing him out of the ring with one arm like he weighed nothing. Finn Balor came at him next, and Reigns caught him with a massive right hand that dropped him instantly. Damian Priest and Seth Rollins tried to double-team Reigns, both men attacking from different angles, but Reigns showed incredible awareness. He ducked under Priest's clothesline attempt, spun around, and caught Rollins with a Superman punch that sent the leader of the Vision crashing to the mat. Priest grabbed Reigns from behind, trying to apply a full Nelson and control the powerful superstar. But Reigns powered out of it with raw strength, breaking Priest's grip and immediately driving him backward into the corner with shoulder thrusts that knocked the wind out of him. Balor had recovered and tried to attack Reigns from behind, but Reigns sensed him coming and caught him with a back elbow that sent Balor stumbling. Reigns followed up with a massive clothesline that sent Balor flipping through the air and crashing to the outside. Dominic Mysterio had climbed back into the ring and tried to attack Reigns with a chair, swinging wildly. But Reigns caught the chair in mid-swing, ripped it out of Dominic's hands, and threw it aside. The look of terror on Dominic's face was priceless as he realized he had just made a huge mistake. Reigns grabbed Dominic by the throat, lifted him high in the air, and delivered a massive chokeslam that drove him through the canvas. The impact was so severe that Dominic bounced and rolled out of the ring, completely unconscious. That left Seth Rollins and Damian Priest, and both men were now showing visible fear. They had gone from being the hunters to being the hunted in a matter of seconds. Reigns stood in the center of the ring, chest heaving, eyes locked on Rollins. The message in that stare was crystal clear. You made a mistake coming after someone I chose to protect. Priest tried to attack Reigns from the side, but Reigns caught him and delivered a massive spinebuster that shook the entire ring. Priest rolled out to the floor, holding his back in agony. Now it was just Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. One-on-one. The former Shield brothers who had torn each other apart over the years were face to face once again. Rollins tried to talk his way out of it, backing up with his hands raised, trying to reason with Reigns. But reasoning wasn't on the agenda tonight. Reigns stalked Rollins around the ring like a predator cornering prey. Rollins tried to roll out of the ring and escape, but Reigns grabbed him by the tights and pulled him back in. Reigns pulled Rollins to the center of the ring and delivered a massive right hand that dropped him. Then another. And another. Reigns was unleashing years of pent-up aggression and frustration on the leader of the Vision. He pulled Rollins to his feet and whipped him into the ropes. Rollins bounced back, and Reigns nearly took his head off with a Superman punch that connected flush. Rollins crumpled to the mat, and Reigns immediately signaled for his spear finisher. The crowd was going absolutely insane, chanting Roman, Roman, Roman at the top of their lungs. Reigns positioned himself in the corner, crouching down, loading up for the spear that would put an exclamation point on his return. Rollins slowly, painfully stumbled to his feet, barely aware of where he was or what was coming. Reigns charged forward with explosive power and speared Seth Rollins nearly in half. The impact was devastating, and Rollins was left lying motionless in the center of the ring. The other members of the Vision were scattered around the ringside area, all of them hurt, all of them having learned a very painful lesson about what happens when you attract the attention of the tribal chief. Reigns stood over Rollins' broken body, chest heaving, and let out a primal roar that echoed throughout the arena. Then he turned his attention to CM Punk, who was still down in the corner, having been beaten down before Reigns arrived. Reigns walked over to Punk and extended his hand. The crowd held their breath, wondering what would happen next. These two men had been rivals, had battled each other, had exchanged harsh words over the years. But in this moment, Reigns was offering assistance, offering an alliance of sorts. Punk looked up at Reigns at that extended hand, and for a moment you could see him considering it, calculating what it meant. Then Punk reached up and took Reigns' hand, and the tribal chief pulled the world heavyweight champion to his feet. The two men stood face to face, and there was a moment of understanding that passed between them. An acknowledgement that despite their history, they had just become allies against a common enemy. Reigns nodded at Punk, and Punk nodded back. No words were necessary. Reigns bent down and picked up the World Heavyweight Championship that had been lying on the mat. For just a moment, he looked at it, and you could see the memories of his own championship reigns flashing through his mind. Then he handed the title to Punk with respect, presenting it to the champion properly. Punk took the championship and clutched it to his chest, still recovering from the beating, but standing tall now thanks to Reigns' intervention. The visual of these two warriors standing together in the ring, surrounded by the broken bodies of the Vision, was powerful and memorable. Reigns' music hit again, and he raised one finger in the air, his signature gesture acknowledging himself as the one. The crowd was still going crazy, completely invested in what had just transpired. Reigns then pointed at Punk, a gesture that seemed to say, "We're in this together now." Punk raised the World Heavyweight Championship high, and the crowd cheered even louder. This unlikely alliance, born from necessity and mutual respect, had just been formed, and the implications were staggering. As Reigns prepared to leave the ring, he stopped one more time and looked down at Seth Rollins' motionless body. He said something that the cameras couldn't quite pick up, but the intensity of whatever he said was clear. Then Reigns rolled out of the ring and started walking up the ramp. The camera stayed on his face, and you could see the determination, the focus, the absolute conviction that he had just sent a message to the Vision and to everyone else in WWE. The tribal chief was back, and he wasn't playing games. Back in the ring, CM Punk was leaning against the ropes, watching Reigns walk up the ramp. The expression on Punk's face was complicated. Gratitude for the save. Respect for Reigns' dominance. But also wariness, because Punk knew that Roman Reigns always had an agenda, always had a plan. For now, they were allies. But what did that mean for the future? What did that mean for Punk's championship? Those questions hung in the air as the segment came to a close. The immediate aftermath saw medical personnel rushing to check on the members of the Vision. All four men needed assistance, leaving the ringside area. Seth Rollins had to be helped up the ramp, still feeling the effects of that devastating spear. Damian Priest was holding his back. Finn Balor was holding his ribs. Dominic Mysterio was barely conscious. The message had been sent loud and clear. The Vision had made a critical error by targeting CM Punk because that act had brought Roman Reigns back into the fold, and the tribal chief had reminded everyone why he's one of the most dangerous men to ever step foot in a WWE ring. The social media reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. Within minutes, Roman Reigns was trending #1 worldwide. Every wrestling website, podcast, and YouTube channel was covering the return. Fans were dissecting every moment of the segment, from the dramatic entrance to the systematic destruction of the Vision to the alliance formed with CM Punk. The consensus was universal. This was one of the most memorable Raw segments in years, and it had completely